caffeine, nicotine, alcohol, weed, cocaine, MDMA, LSD, ketamine, opioids, meth, shrooms, benzos. 12 substances. And every single one of them is doing something specific to your brain right now, or has at some point. This is not a warning. This is an explanation. I'm Obscurophiles, and if you want to actually understand what these things do to your mind and body, subscribe, because we're going deep.
Now you need caffeine just to feel normal, not sharp, just normal. Cut it out suddenly, and you'll know immediately. Headaches, fog, fatigue, irritability, that's withdrawal. We call it a morning ritual, but it's a chemical dependency wrapped in a ceramic mug. Caffeine doesn't wake you up, it delays the crash. Nicotine. Unlike caffeine, nicotine moves faster. You inhale it, and within seconds, not minutes, seconds, it reaches your brain. It triggers a release of dopamine, the chemical associated with reward, focus, and satisfaction. In the beginning, it feels clean. Your heart rate nudges up slightly, your thoughts sharpen, the tension in your shoulders loosens. For a few minutes, your brain actually functions a little better. Then it leaves. Dopamine drops. The calm transforms into restlessness, a background discomfort, an itch you can't name. And the only thing your brain has learned relieves that itch is another hit. This is the trap, and it's elegant in how invisible it is. Each cigarette, each puff, each pod doesn't relax you. It resets the withdrawal that the last one created. The peace you feel between cravings, that's not nicotine helping you. That's your baseline. Nicotine just took it away and gave it back. Over time, the brain's dopamine system restructures around it. Without nicotine, everything feels flat. Physically, it damages blood vessels, the heart, the lungs, depending on how it's consumed. But mentally, the damage is subtler and harder to undo. It convinces you completely, sincerely, that you cannot function without it. Alcohol. Every celebration, every dinner, every awkward social situation. Alcohol is everywhere because it does something caffeine and nicotine don't. It slows your brain down.
It's a depressant, which means it suppresses activity in your central nervous system. The moment it enters your bloodstream, it starts interfering with how your brain communicates with itself. At low doses, this feels great. Warmth, relaxation, social friction disappears. You talk more, laugh easier, feel looser. It feels like connection in liquid form. Then the dose increases. Your judgment dims, your emotions amplify, you get louder, bolder, more likely to say or do things you wouldn't sober. Your coordination drops, but your brain, crucially, doesn't register it. Alcohol makes you feel competent, while systematically dismantling your ability to be competent. The come down is proportional to how much you drank. Fatigue, confusion, dehydration, nausea. The next morning, a hangover. And here's what most people don't think about. The more regularly you drink, the more your brain depends on it to feel calm. Eventually, you're not drinking because it feels good. You're drinking to feel like yourself. Long term, it degrades the liver, weakens the heart, and erodes the ability to regulate your own emotions without it. Here's a question I want you to answer in the comments, honestly. Which of these substances on this list do you think is the most misunderstood by the general public? We're only a few in. Keep that question in the back of your mind as we go through all 12. Drop your answer when we're done.
Colors look more saturated. A conversation that would feel ordinary feels significant. At the right dose, creativity flows and anxiety dissolves. At the wrong dose, or the wrong moment, the same effect can tip into paranoia, confusion, a racing heart. The experience is deeply personal and highly variable. At the peak, reality is altered in a way that's hard to describe to someone who hasn't felt it. Music becomes something you feel physically. Ideas connect in patterns you don't normally see. Then it fades. Thoughts get sluggish. Talking requires more effort. What follows is either a gentle calm or a heavy fog, depending on the person. Cannabis is not particularly physically addictive, but it is mentally habit-forming, especially with frequent use. Regular users often report reduced motivation, dulled memory, and a subtle shift in how their brain processes rest and reward. It's commonly called harmless,
and it may be relatively mild compared to what comes next, but it does change your brain gradually. The question is whether you'd notice.
It burns through its dopamine reserves at an unsustainable rate. The high is intense and short. Within minutes, levels collapse. Anxiety rushes in. Your mood crashes hard. The energy is gone, and what's left is a strong, urgent desire to feel that way again. Cocaine is highly addictive because of how quickly the brain links it to pleasure, motivation, and confidence, and how completely those feelings vanish without it. Over time, the brain gets rewired, the heart gets damaged, blood vessels constrict repeatedly, and one of the cruelest effects, natural happiness becomes harder and harder to access because the brain's reward threshold has been raised by something it can no longer produce on its own. MDMA. Where cocaine hijacks one chemical, MDMA goes after 3 simultaneously: serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin. The chemicals responsible for happiness, reward, and human connection are all released in massive amounts at once. Within an hour of taking it, you feel warmth spreading through your body. Music hits differently, lights seem more vivid, touch becomes electric, and most distinctively, you feel an overwhelming sense of closeness with the people around you. Strangers feel like friends, friends feel like family. The emotional walls that normally exist between people dissolve. The brain is in a state of maximum empathy. At peak, you feel infinite. You dance for hours, talk for hours, feel like everything makes sense. Then the drop. Because MDMA doesn't create serotonin, it deploys what you already have rapidly. When it's gone, it's gone. The emotions don't just fade, they invert. Where there was warmth, there's now hollowness. Where there was connection, there's now distance.
The day or two after heavy MDMA use is sometimes called the come down, or more bluntly, the Tuesday. With frequent use, the neurons that produce serotonin get damaged. Natural emotional highs become harder to reach. Joy requires more effort. Physically, MDMA raises body temperature significantly, can cause dangerous dehydration, and in rare cases, organ failure. They call it the love drug because of how connected it makes you feel. But when it ends, the connection ends with it, and your brain is the one left paying off the debt. LSD. Everything we've talked about so far, stimulants, depressants, dopamine floods, none of it quite prepares you for LSD. Because LSD doesn't just change how you feel, it changes how you process reality itself. LSD is a hallucinogen, an extraordinarily potent one. The dose is measured in millionths of a gram, a near invisible amount on a tiny piece of paper placed on the tongue. It works primarily by binding to serotonin receptors, particularly one called 5-HT2A, which plays a key role in perception, consciousness, and the construction of reality. When it activates, patterns begin to breathe, colors shift in ways they shouldn't, sounds seem to have texture. But it's not quite hallucination in the conventional sense. It's more like the filter your brain normally uses to sort and simplify reality gets removed. You see the raw signal. At peak, which can last anywhere from 4 to 8 hours, the sense of self begins to dissolve. The internal voice that narrates your experience, the one that says, "I am here, this is me," that voice quiets, sometimes completely. People report feeling merged with their surroundings, with music, with other people, with something larger than themselves.
It can be the most beautiful experience of a person's life, or the most terrifying, sometimes both in the same hour. The come down is slow and gentle relative to the peak, a gradual reconstruction of ordinary reality. But some people carry effects for days, weeks, even longer, unexpected emotional sensitivity or fragments of the experience resurfacing unexpectedly. LSD is not physically addictive, but it is profoundly unpredictable. The same dose, the same setting, 2 different days, can produce completely different experiences. It opens the mind, but it doesn't always close it the same way it found it.
But everything feels strange for a while. Sluggish thoughts, a peculiar inner quiet. Ketamine isn't considered highly addictive, but tolerance builds fast. Regular use leads to memory problems, bladder damage, and a persistent emotional flatness, a disconnection that starts as an effect and can become a default state. It can separate you from pain, but it can also separate you from meaning. Opioids. This section matters. Pay attention. Opioids, morphine, oxycodone, heroin, fentanyl, come from the opium poppy plant, or are synthesized to mimic it. They bind to opioid receptors throughout your brain and body, blocking pain signals and triggering an intense release of euphoria that is, by most accounts, unlike anything else. The initial sensation is warmth, deep, total comfort. All pain, physical, emotional, psychological, simply stops. Your body goes completely slack. Your mind empties. It feels like absolute safety, like nothing bad has ever happened or ever could. At peak, everything slows. Breathing slows, heart rate drops, thoughts blur at the edges. It's pleasure, but it's sitting directly next to unconsciousness, and people chase it, again and again. But each time they do, the experience is a little shorter, a little weaker. The brain adapts by producing fewer of its own natural pain-relieving chemicals because it's receiving them from an external source. Now it needs the drug just to feel baseline. Not high, baseline. The withdrawal is brutal in a way that few substances match. Intense physical pain, nausea, sweating, insomnia, psychological agony, every nerve in your body screaming for the substance simultaneously.
And this is why opioids are so devastating. Not just that they feel extraordinary, but that without them, ordinary life becomes genuinely unbearable. They are among the most addictive substances that exist. They reprogram the brain's understanding of what's necessary for survival, placing themselves alongside food, water, and air. Long-term, they destroy organs, relationships, and the ability to experience any kind of warmth without them. The same comfort they gave you at the beginning, it slowly disappears from everything else. Methamphetamine. If cocaine is a surge, methamphetamine is a detonation. It's a stimulant, an extreme one, that simultaneously floods the brain with dopamine and triggers an adrenaline response. However you take it, it hits fast and hard. The energy is explosive. Your heart races, your mind becomes razor sharp, your senses operate at maximum intensity. You feel awake in a way that feels almost superhuman. Thoughts arrive faster than you can speak them. Sleep feels not just unnecessary, but impossible. At peak, the confidence becomes euphoria. The focus becomes obsession. You can talk for hours, work for hours, pursue something with total tunnel vision intensity, convinced it's the most important thing in the world. What's actually happening is your brain is spending its entire dopamine reserve in a single session. There's nothing borrowed about it. It's all being spent at once. Then comes the crash, and it's devastating. Not just tiredness, a full neurochemical collapse, depression, paranoia, cognitive fog, physical exhaustion. The world doesn't just feel slow, it feels gray, purposeless, empty. This can last for days.
Methamphetamine is extremely addictive because of how completely and rapidly it takes over the dopamine system. Every use teaches the brain to associate that drug with the only version of pleasure, motivation, and purpose that feels real. Meanwhile, the brain's ability to generate those feelings naturally deteriorates. With extended use, severe weight loss, memory damage, hallucinations, psychosis. The energy it gives you feels infinite, until you understand it's being borrowed from a future that gets shorter every time. Psilocybin. Psilocybin, magic mushrooms, is a natural hallucinogen found in certain species of fungi. When consumed, the body converts it into psilocin, which interacts with serotonin receptors in a way that bears some similarity to LSD, but with its own distinct character. The onset takes roughly 30 minutes. It begins gently. Colors brighten, patterns seem to move, laughter comes easily. The boundary between you and your surroundings starts to feel more permeable. You become acutely aware of your breathing, your heartbeat, the texture of everything around you. At peak, the shift is deeper. Colors pulse, time stretches. There's often a powerful sense of connection to other people, to nature, to memories and emotions you normally keep at a distance. Some describe it as insight, a feeling of understanding something fundamental about themselves or the world. Others describe it as chaos, a complete loss of their usual mental framework. Usually it contains both. The descent is slow. Reality reassembles. What follows depends entirely on the person and the experience. Peace, gratitude, emotional rawness, occasionally confusion or lingering anxiety. Psilocybin is not physically addictive, but it is powerful and unpredictable.
In clinical research, it has shown significant promise for treating depression and trauma. In the wrong setting or at the wrong dose, it can trigger panic or psychotic episodes in vulnerable individuals. Mushrooms don't show you something that isn't there. They remove the filter from what already is. Benzodiazepines. The last substance on this list is the one hiding in plain sight, in medicine cabinets, in prescriptions, in everyday life. Benzodiazepines. Valium, Xanax, Klonopin. Prescribed legally for anxiety, panic disorders, and insomnia. They work by enhancing the effect of GABA, a neurotransmitter that reduces brain activity and produces calm. The effect begins like relief, real, genuine relief. Muscles release, thoughts slow. The anxiety that felt insurmountable becomes distant and manageable. Your heart rate drops, your body unclenches. The sense of dread that was suffocating you is simply gone. At peak, everything is soft and far away. Worry evaporates, sleep comes easily. There's a gentle, comfortable numbness that many people find deeply comforting, especially those who live with chronic anxiety. But coming down, the side effects appear: drowsiness, memory gaps, emotional flatness. With regular use, the brain stops learning how to calm itself without help. The very anxiety the medication was treating becomes dependent on the medication to stay away. Benzodiazepines are highly addictive when used beyond their prescribed purpose, and sometimes within it. Tolerance develops quickly. Stopping suddenly is genuinely dangerous. Rebound anxiety, tremors, seizures. This is one of the few substances where withdrawal itself can be medically life-threatening. They quiet the mind, but that quiet can become something your brain refuses to create on its own. 12 substances, some legal, some not. Some in your kitchen, some in emergency rooms, some in nightclubs. All of them doing something specific, something real, to the most complex structure in the known universe. The brain doesn't distinguish between a pill and a plant, between a prescription and a street purchase. It responds to chemistry. And chemistry, once it rewires the brain's reward system, is remarkably hard to undo. None of this is a judgment, it's information. Because understanding what something actually does is the only real starting point for any honest conversation about it. And now, go answer that question in the comments. Which one did you think was the most misunderstood?